Welcome to our session, our panel on innovative and compatible ag inputs for today's organic grower. Thank our sponsors for today for this session, BioSafe Systems. Thank you very much for your sponsorship. And again, please silence your cell phones for the session. As Walt said earlier, there's certified crop advisor CEUs available for the session. Make sure to sign in on the sheet at the back of the room or scan the QR code after the session to receive your credit. And importantly, and I'll try to remember this at the end, after the session, lunch will be served over at the conference center at the trade show. So cross over to the parking lot, head that way, spend some time this afternoon at the conference center. Our intention is to make this a very interactive panel session, so we'd love to involve the audience as early as you want to get involved. Raise your hand if you have a comment, a question, want to add a little controversy to the conversation. Walt is in the back. He's got the microphone. Either shout or ask for Walt to come over, and he'll get the microphone to you. So before we get going, I just want to start with some introductions so you get to know people just a little bit who are on the panel. I'll start with myself. I actually started in the industry in 1983 after grad school out here in California. And my first work was actually in biologicals. So I worked on what was then called microbial fungicides at a small startup. They were Pseudomonas, and I don't think they're being used anymore. But I then was at a startup, DNAP, for about 18 years before becoming the head of research at Mendel Biotechnology, and then the CEO of Mendel Biotechnology, where we worked on biotech traits and chemicals and biofuels. And then eventually I went to DuPont Pioneer to lead the Ag Biotech group. And then part of Corteva with the merger of DuPont and Dow and the formation of Corteva. I led the integration of the R&D organization. So I've seen a lot of ag from all different sides. I spent some times debating a lot with organics around biotech traits and other things. And at times at Corteva, of course, we were a very diverse organization serving lots of different customers in different ways, and organics was clearly a part of that. So it's a real pleasure to be here today and moderate this panel. Tim, just introductions?
Tim Stemwoodell, that's me. I guess my knowledge and expertise in this subject here today goes back 30, 35 years, I guess, to when I started California Organic Fertilizers. And I kind of got to that point from being a PCA for a while, and then I was working for companies selling micronutrients and things like that, and I got interested in organics through that way, and was told that if I started making some fertilizers that would go through standard application equipment, that they would buy it from me, and that's what I did, and that led us here to today.
Thank you. Pam?
Pam Marone, spent my career developing biological products for pest management and plant health. In Davis, California, been there for more than 30 years. First company was called Entotech, second one was AgriQuest, third one Marone Bioinnovations, and developed a wide range of products. I stepped down as CEO August of last year after many years running the company, and now I advise many, besides being on the board of Marone Bio, I advise many startups from farm to fork, both ag tech and ag bio types.
And Doug?
Hi, everyone. I'm Doug Currier. I'm with the Organic Materials Review Institute, or OMRI. I've been with OMRI for the past 10 years, spent a lot of time reviewing brand name products in our review program. I'm the technical director now and working on standards and policy development. I interface a lot with the National Organic Program. We also run a Canada and Mexico review program as well.
All right, thank you. So a very diverse and long history for many people on the panel, a lot to share. So let me just, a few kind of framing comments before we get into some questions and discussion. I mean, clearly organic growers, like all growers, have a lot of jobs to do on their farm and a lot of challenges. You want to improve profitability, you want to improve sustainability, improve efficiency, issues of whether it's fertilizing or weed control or insect control. There's a whole set of jobs that growers have to do. And so in a way, we're going to talk today about how you get those jobs done. And from the standpoint of inputs that would be important, but also from the standpoint of maybe some of the tools you might use, whether it's data or satellite images, to get insights about how you might then apply those inputs to your farm. So we're happy and planning to have a very wide-ranging conversation about inputs. Clearly, innovation is at the heart of the conversation because we want to give you a snapshot of some of the things coming your way in terms of new ag inputs. I expect, as we had a discussion beforehand with the panel, that there are some somewhat controversial topics, growers who differ in size, and how they serve the market, what their philosophy might be. And so I've asked the panel not to shy away from those controversies and try to bring those out. And again, we would encourage you to engage in that conversation as well. So hope you come away with a greater understanding of the choices you can make on your farm, the tools and the inputs at your disposal now and in the future, and maybe some of the data that you could use. In my experience, farmers don't care a lot about pretty pictures if they can't do something interesting with those pictures or do something really meaningful in terms of how they then change their decisions on the farm or how they apply their inputs. So that's going to be our focus, really useful kinds of information about what we do. So we'll pick a few different topics. You've heard, get some sense of the background of the people on the panel. I'm going to start with Tim, and let's talk a little bit about fertilizers. You've been in this industry a long time. Could you give us a little history on the evolution of organic fertilizers and what you see coming?
Yeah, my focus right from the beginning on the fertilizer side was with nitrogen compounds, because nitrogen, in organics, nitrogen is our most limiting nutrient that we have. And it's the one we spend an awful lot of time trying to manage, trying to get it to create it by itself, trying to put cover crops in, trying to do these things. But especially in Western agriculture, we don't, it's not really good enough. So we have to have other inputs to be able to do that. And that has been my focus all along. And I think to kind of get to where we are today, we need to go back, let's go back 30 years here and see where this started, how we got, how we are where we are today. So 30 years ago, when I first started visiting organic farms, I'd go out there and go around to a farm, and they would go out and plant crops and do all this stuff and do the best they can, and they'd put some compost or maybe some poultry manure out there, and then when it came to harvest, essentially they'd drive their truck around in the middle of the field trying to find product that's good enough quality to send to the market. And they were earning a living because they were getting a very high price for all of that. And then all of a sudden, the public said, man, we really like this organic stuff, and the demand came up. And of course, at that point, then up comes, bigger, more commercial-sized growers. And they're saying, look, I need something to fertilize this stuff with, and the compost doesn't get it. So it was, so I was told, well, look, you figure out what to do, and I'll do it. So I went and did some research and came up with, protein materials, feather meal, meat and bone meal, some of the things that are standards today. And those products came into the marketplace. And then coming along behind that, there was, somebody said, well, look, let's figure out how to use all this poultry manure we got. Let's figure out we can pelletize it and make pellets and do all of that. We can go put that out there. So then that came into market and into the marketplace in a really big way, because there was plenty of it. Lots of it was available. It was fairly local, could be processed quickly. So that came in and took over a big piece of the market. Now that's going along for a while, that poultry manure was never the best fertilizer in the world anyway, because it has an odd NPK relationship. It's high in phosphorus, and the needs for the plant don't really require all that phosphorus. So everyone kind of knows, anybody who was an agronomist would know there's probably going to be some issues come up with that down the road. And then at the same time, it was like, okay, well, what do we do when we get this stuff releases so fast? It's gone before we get to the end of the crop. So they said, well, we need something that's liquid. So the fish was the first one. So there was a lot of fish being moved around. We had a lot of fish coming out of Mexico, and we had fish in the United States. And then they're like, well, that fish doesn't go through my drip system, so we need something else. So then we started, so anyway, the upshot is that where all of these materials that we've been using have all been coming out of other industries. None of them were designed or built to be a fertilizer for organic agriculture. That's not what they're designed for. So we've already, people like me and other people in the business, we've searched all over the planet for these materials, getting, guano out of South America and, doing all these things and bringing fish and stuff in from out of India, to feed into the marketplace. But they're still not that, they don't really do something that would be designed to do. So in the last few years, there's been a number of companies, that what we've done is we've started looking at how can we produce materials. So what's coming into play there is that, and Pam can talk more about the biologicals, there's been a lot of research on microbial stuff. What we used to think is that, well, microbials, okay, let's go get some Bacillus subtilis or something, we'll mix it in the tank, put it out there and see if that works. Well, if you got 10,000 species of microbes out there in the field, you put one on there, the probability of it working is not so good. So it took a whole different approach, to start working that. And what also has came out of that is companies being able to start producing products, natural. One of them is natural ammonia. It's a biologically produced ammonia made through fermentation processes by taking protein or manure materials, run those through a fermentation, convert the nitrogen into ammonia, and then separate that ammonia out. And then, on the first blush, it says, well, ammonia, that sounds kind of scary. But we're talking about real dilute stuff. We're not talking about Haber-Bosch anhydrous ammonia. We're talking about something that's very, that's of the concentration of what you would buy at the grocery store as a cleaning solution. That's kind of at the level it is. But what's good about that is, though, that what people have seen is that we can take a manure material and separate the excess phosphorus. So we no longer have the pollution of the phosphorus going into the rivers. We don't have the overbuilding of the phosphorus in there. They can separate the phosphorus out, and the phosphorus can be used in soils to where we need the phosphorus. Kind of a side note for that, I read the other day that the world's going to be out of phosphorus in less than 150 years. There won't be any, we'll mine it all. So we really got to recycle this stuff if we're going to get past that. We won't be around, but our kids or our grandkids might. So anyway, the resources are local. You can use all kinds of resources. We're able to now start using the resources of raw materials that are not suitable by themselves as a fertilizer. So we can take those and essentially high grade them, turn them into something that's basically, so we get, we now have the ability to recycle nitrogen, I guess, is what it boils down to, which we haven't been doing very well at. Yeah.
So maybe bring Doug in a little bit to this conversation. Yeah. What's the perspective?
Yeah,
from a standard standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've seen the exact products, Tim, that you're describing. We have them on our list now. So OMRI maintains a brand name products list, and a lot of these products are non-synthetic, which is a requirement for the National Organic Program standards. And because they're non-synthetic, they are currently allowed. I think we should mention, though, that the National Organic Standards Board has recently voted to prohibit the use of what they're defining as concentrated ammonia and stripped ammonia. And they've defined both of those terms, and the products that Tim's describing would fit under those definitions. Now, we should be clear that it's a recommendation, and the National Organic Program has to go through rulemaking to make that official. But I think we should recognize that the NOSB has seen these products and voted to prohibit them, while at the same time OMRI is continuing to review them and list them as allowed. So there is that dynamic at play where we have products that are non-synthetic, they're classified as non-synthetic, they're allowed under the National Organic Program at this point, but we have a recommendation from the NOSB to prohibit them. So
interesting first kind of controversy here a bit. Mm-hmm. I know there's any sort of, maybe just to pause for a moment, any reactions, comments, questions about this issue in the audience?
Why isn't there a standard?
Yeah, so there is a standard right now, which is non-synthetics are generally allowed with exception. Synthetics are generally prohibited with exceptions. So there's a national list of materials that guide the use of materials. So that's the standard. The standard allows for these materials that Tim's describing because they're non-synthetic. We've looked at them. We classify them as non-synthetic. So I think that is the standard right now.
Yeah.
NOSB is recommending to amend the standard.
Yeah, they want to create some new regulation because the members of the NOSB seem to be having some heartburn over it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does it have something to do with the fact whether or not carbon's involved in that ammonia?
So yeah, the question was about the role of carbon.
If in that product you would. If there's carbon associated with that ammonia product, then is that one of the things that makes it difficult for anyone to accept?
Yes. So
Repeat the question.
Yeah, let me answer that one. Yeah, there is and there isn't. It depends on the products that are being made. Some of them have, it depends on whether they're concentrated or whether they're being separated, using some distillation. For example, one of the things they weigh it in against a distillation. Well, I mean, we're using distillation in all kinds of things. There won't be any organic whiskey or any organic tequila or any without distillation, right? So there's some fairly arbitrary, decisions being made along with this. It's like, how does that work? They're classifying. They've also classified ammonia, in this classification of ammonia, would take seabird guano out of the marketplace. So Peruvian seabird guano on what they're proposing is gone because it's about 80% ammoniacal nitrogen.
and I guess to that, we've looked at the definitions and we don't think it would prohibit the use of seabird guano. But I know there was a lot of discussion about the definitions for these products and the repercussions of defining them a certain way and prohibiting unintended materials. And really quickly, there was a second part of the NOSB's recommendation that addressed carbon to nitrogen ratio. That is what they're calling going back to subcommittee. So it's not a final recommendation yet, but they are looking at introducing into the crop fertilizer regulation at 205, 203, a requirement for there to be a carbon to nitrogen threshold that these fertilizers have to meet.
Yeah.
But that's not part of the current.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of controversy there that even CDFA, Martin Berger at CDFA, he weighed in and said that requiring a carbon content to it is really, basically he said it was ridiculous because if you look at the amount of carbon that would go on, that would be created from a cover crop. I mean, we're talking about some huge tonnage per acre, and we're talking about a fertilizer product that's being applied at 100 pounds per acre of having, a 3-to-1, so we're talking about, 10 pounds of carbon or something in comparison. So it really, the other materials, fish, for example, is somewhere around 3 to 4-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. So really, none of these really organic fertilizer products that we're using have a high carbon. I mean, even raw poultry manure is only about 12-to-1, somewhere in that range. So none of them are really very high. So we're not really sure where that came from.
So maybe to kind of round out this conversation, when will the process kind of wend its way through, and is there an opportunity for people to comment on that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, the NOSB has made the recommendation to NOP, the National Organic Program. The NOP has to do what they do in order to make a proposed rule. And then there would be a proposed rule which would be open to public comment. Final rule, if it gets to that point, would also be open for public comment as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of plus and minus. People look at it and go, wow, do we really need to go that way in organics because shouldn't we be doing these other things first? Well, I kind of like we already are doing all those other things first. And the other thing I look at it is that it's like, if they decide they're going to start regulating something like NH3 ammonia, to me that scares the heck out of me because ammonia is in every molecule of protein. It's the basis for protein. It's essential for the carbon to nitrogen ratio. It's a molecule that life on our planet doesn't exist without it. So that kind of scares me. It's like, okay, wow, where are we going to go next from this? if that's just what the rules are going to be. And the other side is the decision making. You as farmers or people that are growing, you decide for yourselves what you want to use. It's there was a set of rules set up, and everybody's using the rules. So the next step is, how do we go beyond this ammonia into other materials? How are the biologicals and things that are starting to be created going to be dealt with?
Perfect. Perfect segue, and thank you for making that connection. So let's turn to some of the biologicals, Pam. And you've been in this industry. We've been sort of coexisting here, I think, for a long time. Maybe give us a little perspective on, again, where biologicals are coming from and some of the trends you see.
Yeah, I'm seeing some big trends. Number one, I'm seeing the convergence of precision technology and integrated pest management and biology. So we have degree day models to predict when pests or diseases are going to come up, but we don't have to be that imprecise, because they can be imprecise. There are companies now that are doing real-time monitoring of spores, fungal spores, like Root Applied Sciences or Spornado. Real-time PCR where they can detect when a spore is in the field, and much better than a degree day model can. So they can tell the farmer when or when not to spray. This is fantastic and transformational for biologicals, because biologicals typically are preventative products, and you need to time them properly. Smart traps, companies like Semios and others have smart traps for monitoring Lepidopteran and other pests, and being able to predict when you can apply your pheromone better. So this is a huge trend. A drone dropping of beneficial predators and mites and so forth, and so an area to watch. Number two is everybody's talking about soil health and the microbiome. This morning, I would have to take issue with some of the speakers. There was some controversy that was generated, but I didn't get a chance to respond. To not waste time, if you're a farmer, on getting your soil tested with one of these microbiome testing companies. I respectfully disagree. And why? Because I'm actually looking at the data from a number of companies I advise, as well as Marone Bio's data. And companies like Trace Genomics and Biomakers can give you some very interesting data. You have to know how to interpret it, so you have to have some data interpreters for it. But for example, on the Marone Bio front, we have a new biofumigant that's under development, and somebody asked, well, what does it do before and after treatment? And so we had a bioinformatics specialist look at it before and after, and showed that it did not change the beneficial microbiome in the soil at all, but it knocked out the plant pathogens. Great information to know. And then I advised a couple other companies, one in the biofertilizer space and one in the biocontrol space. And the before and after microbiome analysis was very revealing. The biofertilizer one is taking poultry manure waste, feeding it to black soldier fly, and then coming out with a biofertilizer tea. They're using it as a tea formulation, a liquid. And we found a significant increase in microbial diversity, so different kinds of microbes, but not necessarily number. And then we found an increase in the microbes that fixed nitrogen, and the microbes that sequestered carbon, and the microbes that increased biocontrol of nematodes. And what does that translate into? Well, the farmers are reporting better yields and improvement in soil health. So I do believe that these types of tools can really help you in revealing. And pretty much it's going to be standard. If you're an inputs provider, what is your product going to do on soil health and microbiome? Every input supplier is going to have to give that information, whether it's a chemical or biological. So,
Pam, you talked about tell us more about this biome, or like this meta studies, or looking at things. Tell us what that means. What do you mean by biome testing?
Okay, so what you do is you'll send off a sample before and after treatment, or just if you want to know what's in there even without any treatments, just what is happening in the soil. And the companies have different ways of characterizing those microbes. So they'll tell you a score, and they'll tell you a high-level summary. But then beneath that, and I've looked at all the raw data for many, many companies, so I know this is real, and not just the companies making up good things about their products. You'll get a score of the biodiversity, so the different types of microbes. So you will get all the genus and species of all the microbes that are in your soil, okay? And then maybe even some uncharacterized one. We can't even identify this. Then you'll get the actual account. So how many, 1 times 10 to the 9th of this kind or whatever. And then it will give you, if you're doing it for an input study, what is the change in the diversity, the number, the types of microbes, and then the characterization of those microbes. Is this group of microbes known to be biocontrol on antifungal or anti-nematode? Is this type of microbes known to be helping nitrogen being taken up into the plant better or sequester carbon? So the companies that are doing this have the characterization of the different types of microbes. They're not perfect, but they can tell you some information, certainly about what's going on in your soil. And every single day, there's a new paper coming out from academic circles about what is going on. And what's really, really important is the interaction between the crop variety and the microbiome. Absolutely, the crop variety, the different plants, the variety, and it's variety dependent, is signaling microbes to come to the plant. And in strawberries, there was just a really fantastic study that showed, indeed, there was a definite difference in the strawberry variety, whether they had more plant pathogens or not. And this was due to the different microbiome that was being attracted by the plant. This has been shown in corn, soybeans, wheat, cassava, strawberries, and I'm trying to think what other plants, but continually showing. So if you're a plant breeder, you better darn know what your plant variety is doing on the microbiome. You can't be alone just breeding without knowing what's going on in the soil. So this is really, really interesting. And organic, generally ignored on the crop breeding, not as much anymore, finding that often the organic varieties might actually be better at attracting different microbes to the roots, and particularly mycorrhizae, but not just mycorrhizae. Microbes, both bacteria and fungi, are attracted by the type of crop the variety. So this is some of the exciting things going on.
It is very exciting, and you don't seem very excited about it.
No, never.
You get a little more passionate.
Never.
Well, I remember 40 years ago when I was first working on biologicals, there was this notion of suppressive soils. Let's go look at those soils and see what they were doing.
That's real.
But now we're getting real insights into it,
Absolutely,
right? What makes
absolutely.
them suppressive?
And one thing is, there's a debate whether one single microbe is not as good as a consortia. The jury's out on that, because the variety, the plant tends to select which microbes it lives with, okay? And you can temporarily change those microbes in the soil with a crop input or your practices, your irrigation or whatever. Many things change those microbes. But the number of the microbes that are associated with that plant is pretty resilient. So it's not necessarily true that adding a consortium of microbes is better than adding a single microbe. It really depends on the plant, the system, and what you're trying to do.
Fair point. So I think there's the sort of hypothesis, let's say, about the value of microbiome, multiple microbes that interact and support each other to give more sort of durability and resilience to the product. I think it's a pretty good hypothesis, and
Yes.
probably will work in some cases, maybe other cases.
Yep.
A single microbe will be
Yep.
very
You can
effective.
supplement with a single microbe, yeah.
And I think, another example, just if I weigh in here as a panelist and moderator, Scanet's a very interesting company that also does these spore
Scanet,
cams,
that's
right, which gives you, it's using essentially imaging in real time as the spores fly through this little can tell you what's happening in your field. So rather than waiting for disease in the field, you can actually see, well, now it's going to come 2 days later very accurately. And I think part of the challenge with biologicals, as you said, has always been timing.
Timing.
So I think there's an opportunity for data
Absolutely.
and imaging to be an incredible tool to make it more effective.
Pam, are there any tools at the plant breeding level that identifies how plants are reproductive to reproductive or generative versus reproductive, moving back and forth? Because all these inputs are really, that's what's affecting the plant. So from a plant breeder level, are there any tools to analyze how the inputs are reproductive to vegetative and back and forth?
There is a company called Dyetech that is got sensors, real-time sensors, every plant dialed in a greenhouse dialed into, and there's other companies doing this as well, that are able to determine what the plant is doing real time. And so there are some companies that are now being able to assess exactly what's happening, and that's a very good tool for breeders as well as crop input manufacturers to know what's happening with the plant with different varieties as well as varieties and treatment combinations. Yeah. Dyetech, Plant Dyetech. They are an Israeli company. They are very active in the U.S. now with a very interesting system. I know Marone Bio installed one and really loves it in the greenhouse because you can find out what the plant is actually doing from these sensors before and after treatments. Yeah, and that's great for different crop varieties as well.
Wait, one in the back. Before we come to, just give me a second. There's one in the back first. We'll come to you.
Thank you, Pam. I have a question for Tim and I have a question for Doug. Question for Tim. How do you differentiate between Haber-Bosch ammonia and the ammonia that you're proposing to use for your products?
Well, the first thing is one's synthesized and the other isn't.
Right.
And that's the kind of the basic of the whole thing. The molecule.
Right. But how do you differentiate between the two? Because we know the history of organic fertilizer, liquid organic fertilizers particularly, and the history of some of the vitamin products, and we know Biolizer and Agrolizer, etc. Some of these new innovations at the time, they were all listed by OMRI. They all claimed that they're naturally and microbially produced, but we know what happened to those products. People ended up in jail and all kinds of other things. So what technology is there, and this maybe Doug can chime in on this one, to differentiate between just adding as much ammonia as you want to whatever the base product is and calling it your naturally derived ammonia from whatever concentration technologies you have for these particular products?
Well, anybody could do that anytime they want with anything. You can add ammonium sulfate to chicken manure if you want to and call it natural. It isn't any different than that. If you want to do some chemical testing, you can do isotope testing. That works fine. You can characterize the product.
Which isotope in particular? Because I spent decades in this business, and particularly with microbial digestion products. Mm-hmm. And I've never been able to be so smart to produce products like that. And I've never been able to figure out on the basis of what technology does OMRI list these products, because every one of these products that were pulled off the market and people put in jail because of it have been OMRI listed before.
Well, the good thing is
that getting into another era of similar products.
And let's go to
well, I hope not. I mean,
is the industry going to suffer the consequences as we did before?
You might want to.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Absolutely, yeah. We do on-site inspections, so a lot of these products that we have listed now are H&LF, so high nitrogen liquid fertilizers. We have to go on site twice a year to inspect them. We also have an expected nutrient calculator that we can run to detect fraud. The example you're bringing up is hopefully unique in that there was underground storage containers and pre kind of on-site inspections that we're doing now. So there's not just one way to prevent fraud or detect fraud, but multiple ways. And the isotope analysis is something that we've done in the past. We've kind of moved away from it because it's somewhat variable in the results, especially when you have multiple starting materials, so feedstocks, and so it can give you unreliable results, is what we've found. But yeah, I think it comes down to going on site, running those expected nutrient calculators, and lining that up with what's being reported. But it's interesting dynamic as far as if the price. We've written an article about this in our newsletter. If the price of nitrogen that's derived from natural gas or petroleum, if that's coming down to the point where the organic sources are on par, or perhaps even better, as far as the petroleum derived, and then you have those environmental conditions that might be ripe for fraud.
We all know that OMRI is supposed to inspect plants unannounced, and also that they're supposed to inspect us two times a year.
Yes.
And in my 15 years of running my own production plant, we've been inspected twice by OMRI. Most recently, a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And honestly, the inspectors you send, we can run circles around,
Okay.
backwards and forwards.
Oh, dear.
We really don't know very much. Unfortunately, that's the case.
Okay.
So
That's very good
if
feedback.
if we were such minded company,
Yeah.
we could pass every inspection you can send to our plant.
Okay.
And the other last question for you, Doug, is
Yeah.
on what authority are you approving these products when NOP is
You have a memo.
questioning it? NOP is our Bible and our authority for all of us, manufacturers and inspectors alike. And if NOP hasn't made up their decision, what authority do you have to approve these products ahead of the NOP decision?
Yeah. So
And
all
same
of
goes for CDFA.
Yeah, so all of our standards are based off of the National Organic Program standard as published right now. The NOSB is making recommendations to change those regulations, but until the NOP follows through with rulemaking, we are going to follow what's published. Right now, these non-synthetic materials are not prohibited by regulation. We have developed a restriction that we apply to these, which restricts the use of the products based on 205, 203, which means basically our restriction is these products are at higher risk for contamination of land, soil, water. And that restriction follows all of these products. But I guess to get to your question directly again, it's based off of what's published now. And if we're able to make a classification, we're going to do that. And it's not really a question of can these be approved, or rather, it's not a question of should these be approved, it's can these be improved. And we've worked with the National Organic Program since 2018 on this same question, and we've received guidance from them directly. And they've told us the same thing. If these are classified as non-synthetic, the growers aren't violating 205, 203, they're allowed.
So I want to move this on a little bit,
Sure.
and maybe we can come back at the end if there's more time, or maybe offline at the lunch. Go to the next question, and then we'll come back to the biologicals a bit more.
This question is for Pam. You mentioned the fumigation. Is that the alternative to methyl bromide, that controlling actually the pest?
To a degree. It's based on a fungus, Muscador albus, strain SA13, which was found way back when in a rainforest in Honduras, but there's many strains since that. And it is as good on methyl bromide, except it doesn't control weeds, so unfortunately. So nematodes and plant pathogens and insects, pest insects it would kill, but not weeds, so that's a weakness. But it was on and off at Marrone Bio's product development for many years, and due to other priorities. And But they're continuing to develop it, and we have years worth of data in strawberries and leafy greens, and it's very, very promising. Yeah.
What about the rice flour, Pam? I see some of the people are using that as.
There's a number of things like, there's grains and mustard and a number of, they're coming along. There are companies that have started to look at some of those as bulky fumigants, but they're not really fumigants. Well, they are fumigants to a degree. Certainly the mustard meal is, and they are coming along in getting better and more data that you can. They have some use. Yeah.
Do you have a question up front here?
Yeah, we're using rice bran.
Yeah.
In rice bran to generate heat.
Oh, to generate heat. Okay.
Some weeds and bacteria.
That's like an anaerobic type
Are
reaction.
you doing
that they're creating,
anaerobic soil digestion?
Yes.
Yeah, ASD is got a lot of research behind it that's showing it's expensive, but it's very promising. Yeah.
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 And it's it's readily available, fortunately. The other question,
Please.
If I could ask one of my concerns, and I may be unfounded, with the changes in the methods of raising chickens, where they're more free range or bigger containers, we're seeing a real shortage in manures. And generally speaking, is this a common thing? Are we going to reach the point where we need more organic products than are possibly being able to be
Absolutely.
purchased on the
Yes,
market?
you're
Tim,
right.
this is-
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, even during those NOSB meetings, there was people coming on saying, oh my goodness, if they're going to make ammonia out of the chicken manure, I don't have any chicken manure to use.
Yeah.
So, and I'm hearing all over the place, there's shortages of it,
Yep.
and the price has gone up.
Yep.
So we're starting to hit kind of a wall, even the protein materials. I mean, there's some of them like soy meal and things that we have, there's large, supply lines of that. But when you get to feather meal and meat and bone meal, and the interesting thing about these is the relationship that it puts organics in with conventional agriculture, because that's where they're all coming from. So we have to figure out how we can do this and not be dependent upon, on capos or any of these other people.
So one of the things I do in my spare time is sit on the board of the CGIAR, which is the International Ag Organization for the Developing World. And these issues are issues, of course, in California, they're issues in the US, they're global issues. And the issues of transforming how we farm relate to soil health and carbon and adapting to climate change. And it seems like microbials have a real role in whether it's contributing to nitrogen as an alternative as well, to soil health, even to carbon mining. So maybe, Pam, a little perspective, if you will, on that opportunity?
There is an explosion of research going on in finding naturally occurring microbes that can fix nitrogen in monocots in corn and other grains, because we have the rhizobium for the legumes. And there's some very interesting microbes that are being found, some not so ordinary, so they're completely novel. And so this is a huge area coming up to watch for sure. So a lot of venture capital and money going into these types of companies. Interestingly, Brazil has become the #1 biological inputs country. It has surpassed the United States in the use of biologicals. And why is that? Well, they've had serious pest resistance problems, particularly with armyworm caterpillar types, and so the chemicals weren't working anymore. So the government was looking for solutions and provided regional extension specialist training to help the farmers learn how to use these, and that's what's critical with these types of products. They're also finding the very interesting microbes that are being deployed for nitrogen and fixation and nutrient uptake. Not just, but also making phosphorus, helping phosphorus uptake into the plant better. Just saw a completely novel one. So yeah, this is the next world that's coming. It's very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, you do see mycorrhizae now. There are companies selling mycorrhizae, obviously, to do that.
Groundwork
Bioag.
Bioag has a microbe from the Israeli desert, a mycorrhiza from the Israeli desert that works very well. It's hardier, and Valent Biosciences has a line of mycorrhizae. So mycorrhizae is old but becoming new again. And that's true of a lot of microbes. As we learn how to ferment them or make them, produce them in different ways and better, and because you can sequence the genome of a microorganism, it tells you much more about what that microbe is doing and what potential metabolites or compounds it's making or excreting, or what it's doing with the plant. You can also sequence the plant's genome and find out what the plant is doing in response to a microbe. So the world of this genomics is really helping us to improve the products and deliver better and better products.
And I think one of the interesting things about the groundwork bioag and mycorrhizae is that I think all farmers are giving more thought to how do we actually put carbon underground and sequester carbon in a stable way, because one of the problems is it might not be that stable. And mycorrhizae produce very stable carbon deposits underground. So it actually could be something that fosters fertilizer uptake, fosters soil health, and even carbon deposition. This is another example of the sorts of diversity of microbial options out there.
A number of the companies are gathering the data. Marone Bio just put out a study on that, on being able to reduce your carbon footprint, and Marone Bio found 60 to 90% reduction of carbon footprint by 3 of the top biological products compared to their synthetic counterparts. So that's very exciting. Groundwork put out a really nice paper,
study,
really nice one recently too. Yeah.
You have a question here, or comment?
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, there were 2 suppressive soils in the world for fusariums and lettuce. One was here in Salinas, and there was another one in France. You probably remember that. Are we at the point where we understand what makes a soil suppressive? And are there companies today that can work with a grower to say, okay, let's develop a procedure here, or practices that will help convert your soil to be suppressive to these problems that you have? Does the question make sense?
Somewhat. We talked about that in the other panel this morning. Where I've seen the suppressive soils happen is back to back to back. The crop is not rotated with some other crop, but it's continuous, like in a continuous wheat or continuous lettuce. And over time, the microbiome adapts and becomes suppressive. So, I mean, one of the speakers was recommending that you just plant, and let you plant back to back. But that's very risky to just want to naturally develop your suppressive soil. But that might be an interesting strategy to, in part of a field somewhere, is just continuously plant the crop, and then over time that soil will develop suppressiveness on its own. That does show to be happening. In the case of fusarium and the case of the wheat with the take-all, it was interesting. It was a group of Pseudomonas bacteria that were producing compounds that were causing the suppressiveness. It wasn't a wide range of microbes. It was particularly that group, taxonomic group. So it really depends.
It was Pseudomonas fluorescens, that was what got me in this industry.
Exactly.
Was that what was contributing to the suppressiveness?
Yes. Absolutely.
On the list?
Yeah, it was. In both systems, it was this group, and there's another one from on the cassava in Africa that was similar. These Pseudomonas, fluorescent Pseudomonas bacteria seem to become the dominant in these suppressive soil systems. But while you're in the rest of your field, you don't want to just put your field out there and wait for the suppressiveness to happen. So I think pockets of fields where what I've done is found growers' fields where they see a pocket in their field which is healthier than other parts of the field, and then find those microbes in there and make some teas out of those and apply it to the rest of the field. That works. Yeah.
And I think this sort of evolution of new diagnostic tools,
Yes.
sort of metagenomics to know
To be
what's
able to know
in
that.
the soil,
Yeah.
then you can correlate what's in the field, different parts of your field, with the microbial
Right.
populations. So that's coming as well.
Can I make one more little comment about? I'd like to make a little more comment about your question about the manure side of the thing and the nutrient side. That There's a company that's coming into our area. We're over in Hanford, California here, and they've just received a big grant from the state. But what they're going to do is they're putting $1 billion into manure processing to energy. Also throughout the valley over there, we have the dairies that are putting in large digesters, anaerobic digesters for energy things. And some of this ammonia technology fits that perfectly to be able to capture that ammonia. So what we'd be looking at there really is the ability to take and use the manure to make energy, but yet now the manure, right now, about 60 or 70% of the manure is lost before it's ever turned into a fertilizer on the field. The nitrogen's lost out of it. In these type of situations, they're capturing all of it. So it all can be captured, it all can be put back and recycled back into, and actually be produced as a product that was actually made for organic agriculture.
You want to go ahead? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of an ask for an opinion from each of you. I'd like to hear your opinions, but it piggybacks off of what Pam was saying about Brazil's transition to more biological use as a result of pest resistance from overuse of chemicals. And we saw a huge interest in biologicals in the early 2000s, maybe 2013 may have been its peak in my experience. And then it kind of dropped off because of pushback from industry, from farmers and things like that. So I guess my question would be, what type of time frame do you guys see, or what would you like to believe would be a time frame where the United States would start to make that similar transition that Brazil made?
Well, big ag is a very surmountable thing to get past, but they are also expressing a lot of interest in recycling of the nutrients. And I mean, if we're looking today at, somebody was just telling me that UN32 prices is like $640 a ton. Okay? So that's more than double here just within a year or so. These prices have gone way up. And that, I think, just the economics alone because of that is going to push the biological side really big. Because we have to be able to, sooner or later, we're going to have to be able to take this, be creating at least some portion of our nitrogen, in the soil. And, being able to use that carbon-nitrogen cycle, which essentially is really just one cycle. Everybody talks about the carbon cycle and nitrogen cycle, but really they're one. One doesn't exist without the other. So it's managing the carbon and being able to do the nitrogen all has to come from a biological side. So we have to figure that out a little better.
So 2 things. Number 1 is education and awareness. Okay, Farm Journal Pulse poll of 500 and something growers not long ago showed, let's see, it was 41% would like to try biological but were unsure. 25% didn't have a clue. Only 4% were negative. Okay, so we have in the industry and the key influencers have a lot more work to do to help growers understand how to use these products. They are different modes of action. They might be slower kill. They give season-long control. And the way products are so number 1 is awareness and education. Number two is awareness and education, but at a different level. Not just farmer, but at the land-grant university extension level, okay? There is generally low proficiency of how to use biologicals. I'm going to get people mad at me, but there are pockets where there's positive and a proficiency in how to use these products. But a lot of times, and still, it's standalone trials against the best cocktail of chemicals instead of looking at what it does in an integrated program. And also what it does to soil health, to soil and plant health, to yields, quality. And so a lot of the trials are done 48, 72 hours, how many bugs are counted, how many leaf spots. This is not the best way to evaluate a biological in a small plot. They're better to do large plots on farm demos and integrated programs. So we need systems integrators to integrate not just inputs that are needed, but the entire. I was down in Florida talking to a citrus grower and saying, a big citrus, had citrus greening problems. He goes, Pam, I see those trees over there are resisting citrus greening, and I know it's the crop variety. I'm doing a soil health regime over here. I'm trying some different biostimulants and bionutrients, and that's having an effect. But I don't have anybody to help integrate all of this into a system to make me farm better. And so that's where I think the barriers are. There's a Sustainable Pest Management Working Group, which I've been appointed to by Department of Pesticide Regulation, that is addressing this very problem, and hopefully we'll make some progress on that.
Let me add maybe just another perspective here. When I think about the consumer is actually creating a big pull, I think, on sustainability, on more natural products, whatever they may be, right? Even if it's in conventional ag as opposed to organics. And that's strongest in Europe. I mean, Europe's committed in 2030, right, to reduce synthetic pesticides by 50%. That's going to open up opportunities for biologicals that don't have to compete with a synthetic chemical, right, and have a new market opportunity. In the US, we've not gotten to that place. So I'm not sure, that might happen a lot faster in Europe than it would in the US for that reason. And I think a lot of the larger companies, are combining biologicals with synthetics. That was AgriQuest, I think, one reason Bayer bought them in 2013, right in your time frame, right? Because of that opportunity to mitigate resistance with multiple modes of action, even if the biological wasn't robust enough to survive on its own in a sort of more conventional regime. So there's a lot of aspects to that. I know we're running out of time, so it's 11:27. Maybe if I could just 40 seconds. Any final thoughts from each of you? And then we'll wrap up and head over to lunch.
Yeah, I'll just say inerts, I think, continue to be an issue. Yes.
Big deal.
So if we're talking about innovation and perhaps even stifling innovation, the NOP's inability to move beyond that 2004 EPA List 4 is contributing to that. So an update, the inerts are still on the national list as a allowed synthetic. The NOP just needs to work with EPA and industry to move past it, which is on their plate. But yeah, just want to bring that up as a clarifying update on inerts.
Okay. A little follow-up on that at the NOSB. I would recommend you guys really should start paying attention to what that group is doing. I think it's important. In recent meetings, they've came out very strongly against drip irrigation. They don't like it. They don't like hydroponics at all, even though the NOP has said hydroponics is okay at this point. And the other thing is this group that they are also, I just lost that train of thought. That was what was the third one? It was hydroponics, drip irrigation, hydroponics, and what was the list for, I guess? It was that they're against.
Thank you.
I
Pam,
would
last
say
thought?
just keep an eye on what's happening on the soil health and soil microbiome, because this is it would be great to get carbon credits payments for transition to biologicals. Would be fantastic.
That would be great.
On the drip, is it because of the plastic use?
No, it's the soluble nutrients. They don't like soluble nutrients. They don't like anything soluble.
California, this whole
Yeah, forget it. Everything's drip.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying you guys need to speak up. If you don't, we really need this. How are you going to grow strawberries? It's going to make it pretty tough.
almost every crop now.
Yeah, the almonds are all going on the drip. Everything's going the drip.
All right.
Especially these long-term crops. That's the tough one.
I just want to say I'm at an OMRI booth, so if we want to continue the conversation, I'm there today and tomorrow.
I was wondering about your registration issues. Can they be diverted into biodynamic? Because it's just a philosophical, unscientific, a lot of these concepts. And I just wonder what you thought of that.
Can we maybe, and we're at the hour, I hate to hold people who have places to go. Let's take it at your booth.
Yes.
Let me thank the audience for your engagement. Thank the panelists, please.